Bangladeshi visits our very own students of the Department of Finance at the University of Caledonia. Keeping in line with tradition and culture of Sri Lanka, we call upon our dignitaries to mark the commencement of this historic occasion with traditional lighting of the oil lamp. First and foremost, I would like to cordially invite our chief guest, High Commissioner of India to Sri Lanka, His Excellency Mr. Taranjit Singh Sandhu, followed by our guest of honor, Secretary to the Ministry of Higher Education, Technology and Innovations, Mr. Anuruddha Disanayake, Director of the National Centre for Advanced Studies, Professor Lal Mervyn Dharmasiri, Keynote Speaker, the United States Director at the American Institute for Sri Lankan Studies, Dr. John D. Rogers, Senior Research Fellow at the National Centre for Advanced Studies, Professor Dilkushi Senaratne, representing the Council of Management of the National Centre for Advanced Studies, Professor Indralal De Silva, representing the Council of Regent of the NCAS, Dr. Suthakar, representing Vice Chancellors, Rectors and Directors of the University Grants Commission, Professor D. M. Semasinghe, and a representative from the participants. Yes, you may take your seats now and please make way for our very talented students from the Department of Finance at the University of Caledonia who have an entertainment performance in store for us.
Saranena
Please give them a round of applause, our students of the Department of Fine Arts, for that dazzling performance. On this note, I would like to call upon the following dignitaries to grace us at the head table, starting off with our chief guest, High Commissioner of India to Sri Lanka, His Excellency Mr. Taranjit Singh Sandhu, our guest of honor, Secretary to the Ministry of Higher Education, Technology and Innovations, Mr. Anuruddha Dissanayake, Director of the National Center for Advanced Studies, Professor Lal Mervin Dharmasiri, keynote speaker for the event, the United States Director at the American Institute for Sri Lankan Studies, Dr. John D. Rogers, Secretary to the University Grants Commission, Dr. Priyantha Premakumara, and Senior Research Fellow at the National Center for Advanced Studies, Professor Dilkushi Senaratne. A very good morning to all of you and welcome to the inauguration of the second International Symposium on Social Sciences and Humanities, organized by the National Center for Advanced Studies in collaboration with the University Grants Commission of Sri Lanka. The National Center for Advanced Studies plays a pivotal role in uniting professionals interested in advanced studies and research in fields of humanities and social sciences. This unique focal point has been promoting reflective thinking, innovative ideas, creativity, and originality while uplifting our academics. This year's symposium, which unfolds with the theme Development towards Sustainability, would undoubtedly provide an excellent platform for our practitioners, academics, policymakers, and researchers to share their experiences and expertise through presentation of high-quality research and intellectual discussions. To welcome all of you for gracing us with your presence, it is my pleasure to call upon the Director of the National Center for Advanced Studies in Humanities and Social Sciences, Professor Lal Mervin Dharmasiri.
Very good morning. Most venerable sirs, His Excellency High Commissioner of India, Mr. Taranjit Singh Sadhu, Secretary to the Minister of Higher Education, Mr. Anure Disanayaka, keynote speaker, Dr. John D. Roger, Director, American Institute for Sri Lankan Studies, Education Counselor for the High Commission of India in Sri Lanka, Mr. Narayan Gopal, Deans of the faculties, Directors of the institutions, Co-Chair of the Symposium, Professor Mrs. Dilkushi Senaratne, the local and foreign delegates, distinguished scholars, representative from the media, all members of the organizing committee, my dear colleagues and students. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the second International Symposium on Social Science and Humanities conducted by the National Center for Advanced Studies in Humanities and Social Sciences, that's called NCAS. The NCAS was established under the University Act number 16 of 1978 by ordinary by number 2 of 2005. Later it was amended by the ordinance number 3 of 2008. I beg your pardon. The NCAS was set up primarily to cater the emerging needs of the academic community working in the areas of social sciences and humanities. In the national university system, it was initiated by the late Professor Senaka Bandarnayaka and several senior professors in the relevant fields. The prime objective of the NCAS are the retrieve, reflecting thinking and innovative ideas and to support the research culture within the university system as well as at the national and international level. It has also contributed towards an enhancement of the national capacity to absorb new knowledge and advance ideas and promote and provide opportunities for national capacities to absorb new knowledge and advance ideas and provide opportunities for postgraduate studies and training at reputed international level institute and overall human resource development of the university community of the country. So far, the NCAS has granted 496 academics for the postgraduate studies from higher education institutes and in universities in the world. About 61% of the grantees have successfully completed their postgraduate studies. Another 192 grantees are undergoing their studies. These grants were given in the field of humanities and social sciences, and particularly management, language studies, law, fine art, etc. Sri Lanka, India, Australia, United Kingdom, Malaysia, and New Zealand are the countries in which the highest number of scholars have been given opportunities. At present, the NCAS is following a policy to prioritize grants for the candidates who have selected universities within the top 1,000 universities of the world for the PhDs. According to, we are expecting world-class experts to serve our universities and help to enhance the quality of education in our national universities. When considering the monetary value of the grants that have already been disbursed, the NCS has spent about 700 million rupees for the academic of the universities. The highest number of grants were given to the University of California, Jawaharlal University, and the University of Colombo, respectively. At present, almost all the academics of the higher education institutions and national universities of the country are supported by the NCAS. Apart from the scholarship program, the NCAS has been organizing short programs on research methodologies, statistics, and different techniques and softwares that can be applied for analysis of the PhD studies. The NCAS is proud to present the second International Symposium of Social Science and Humanities under the broad theme of development towards sustainability. We have received more than 200 abstracts from scholars from Sri Lanka as well as from the foreign countries. Based on the quality and importance of the research, the evaluation committee has selected about 130 abstracts, which have already been published in the conference proceedings. The committee has further reviewed and selected about 60 research abstracts for the presentation at this symposium today and tomorrow. So I highly appreciate the commitment of the researchers, scholars, as well as the reviewers to make this event a success. The overall advice given by the former chairman and former vice chairman of the University Grant Commission and other officials are also appreciated. It is our honor that His Excellency Mr. Taranjit Singh Sandhu, at the High Commissioner of India to Sri Lanka, accept our invitation to attend the program as a chief guest. Sir, we warmly welcome you. It's our great pleasure to welcome Mr. Anuradhi Saganayaka, Secretary to the Minister of Higher Education, to this symposium. It's our honor that our keynote speaker, Dr. John D. Roger, Director, American Institute of Sri Lankan Studies, for accepting our invitation to make a keynote speak. And also, I welcome panelist speakers from India and Sri Lanka. I also welcome all the deans, head of the institutions, reviewers, chairpersons of the technical sessions, all the members of the organizing committee, all presenters and participants, all students and NCAS staff to the symposium. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I would like to invite our guest of honor, Mr. Anuradhi Saganayaka, Secretary to the Ministry of Higher Education, Technology and Innovations, to address the gathering.
Very good morning to you all. Venerable sirs, His Excellency, the High Commissioner for India, Mr. Taranjit Singh Sandhu, and keynote speaker, Dr. John D. Rogers, representing United States Director and American Institute for Sri Lankan Studies, Professor Lal Dharmasiri, the Director of NCAS, and distinguished members who are in the organizing committee, and distinguished delegates representing this symposia. It's a great pleasure to speak a few words on this occasion of the Second International Symposium on Social Sciences and Humanities 2019, conducted by the National Center for Advanced Studies for Humanities and Social Sciences. This is indeed a valuable opportunity for academics to share their innovative research findings with the other colleagues and intellectuals. I'm happy to note that NCAS has not only supported Sri Lankan academics financially, but also provided a suitable platform for them to showcase their research findings and obtain useful constructive comments which will help them to fine-tune their research and make it more meaningful to their relevant. As you all know, we are now heading a new era. Beginning 2020, the Saubhagya Dakman government new manifesto has focused sustainable development goals as one of the fundamentals in developing our 5-year agenda. So 17 sustainable development goals have to be incorporated to every sphere of our development initiatives. During last 3-year period, there's a Sustainable Development Council, which happened to be located or centered at the Ministry of Environment, where I happened to be the Secretary of Environment then. So we were able to develop and prepare 9 provincial sustainable development plans to cater the national goals. We all know this entire world is now gathered among these 17 goals, and so everyone have a stake to share their contribution. So that I'm so glad that the area of humanities and social science is also gathering in this national agenda. It's a timely initiative. I'm sure these findings of the symposia and the research documents will help national planners and people like us to formulate our next 5-year development strategy. As a responsible higher educational institution, understanding towards sustainable development of the country, the National Center for Advanced Studies in Humanities and Social Sciences, in collaboration with the University of Grant Commission and my ministry, has organized this 2-day conference on the theme of development towards sustainability. I have seen the agenda. This has been spelled out very constructive 2 days of deliberations, and I just heard from the director that among 200 odd abstracts, they have selected 60 odd abstract to be technical papers to be presented. So I'm sure the findings of this symposia will certainly help me, as you know, that I'm only a 2 weeks old secretary of this ministry, but I bring a wealth of knowledge from the secondary education as secretary education earlier for a couple of years, and then secretary environment, and I'm sure these intellectual property that I will be getting after these 2-day deliberations will certainly help to reshape our education spectrum and the national development platform to a meaningful decade ahead of us. With that, let me wish success for all the presenters, and then let me thank Professor Dharmaziri and his able team for organizing this valuable academic deliberations which will be starting today and going until tomorrow. Thank you once again.
Thank you, sir. It is my privilege to call upon our Chief Guest, High Commissioner of India to Sri Lanka, His Excellency Mr. Tharanjit Singh Sandhu, to address the gathering.
Secretary, Ministry of Higher Education of Sri Lanka, Mr. Anurag Dissanayake, Director Dharmasiri, and faculty members, research fellows of National Center for Advanced Studies in Humanities and Social Sciences, Dr. John Rogers, leadership of UGC of Sri Lanka, young scholars, friends. I'm happy to be here this morning at the 2nd International Symposium on Social Sciences and Humanities. I thank the organizers, NCAS, UGC, and Ministry of Higher Education of Sri Lanka for giving me the opportunity to interact with young scholars. It's always a pleasure to meet young and thinking minds. I firmly believe that the youth are our future and also hold the key to our future. The theme of the symposium development towards sustainability chosen by the organizers is most significant given the times we live in. You will agree with me that development cannot be mindless, reckless, and directionless. Many people confuse creation of structures of bricks and mortar, expansion of fancy buildings and skyscrapers as development. To me, these are just superficial changes. Real development goes beyond these. It has to be inclusive and bring about economic prosperity for all with positive social changes. Our growth path needs to be clean, green, smart, and sustainable, and should take us towards social progress with stability. How can we achieve this is the million-dollar question. Countries at the bottom of the development ladder need to grow while the developed world continues to have large carbon footprint. We have common but differentiated responsibilities. An important aspect of this story is the need to have the alternatives that are available, affordable, and accessible. We need to have innovation and technology with a human face. We look upon scholars like you in making this happen. I do not know whether many of you are aware, India is a home today to 26 unicorns, that is, startup companies valued at over $1 billion. Companies like Ola, Zomato, Swiggy, and Paytm are homegrown and have revolutionized our lives. India is also home to more than 2 million social enterprises, companies which cater to diverse social causes. In the last 8 years, over 1.2 billion Indians have received their biometric IDs, Aadhaar as we call it. This was the fastest ever rate of reaching a billion users, and it has surpassed the growth of global giants like Facebook, WhatsApp, and even mobile phones. We also run the largest financial inclusion program in the world, Jan Dhan. The Jan Dhan Aadhaar mobile trinity have curtailed corruption and has brought new meaning to good governance in India. Every day we hear such inspiring stories like that of a 19-year-old boy who is set to build 500 astronomy labs across India, or people who gift bamboo toothbrush and steel straws for Christmas, or administrative service officer from Himachal Pradesh who used 7,000 kgs of plastic waste to make beaches, roads and toilets, or development of an ultrasonic solar-powered snake repellent which can be used by farmers to avoid snake bites. This is the new India. This is the brand India. Similarly, there are young Sri Lankan scientists who are making satellites, who have provided key elements of software to global giants like eBay, Cisco Labs. We see a promising future. Friends, both India and Sri Lanka have a long history and tradition of harmonious coexistence between man and nature. Both our countries have values that cherish, nourish, and protect the environment. For us, going green is not a new motto. It has always been part of our very existence. We are only building on to our legacy. I remember the words of Mahatma Gandhi, whose 150th birth anniversary we are celebrating this year. The difference between what we do and what we are capable of doing would suffice to solve most of the world's problems. In fact, Mahatma Gandhi was deeply influenced by Lord Buddha. And Lord Buddha has said centuries ago, I never see what has been done. I only see what remains to be done. My young friends, every step counts, and we cannot outsource our responsibility towards creation of a greener and a richer planet to anyone else. We ourselves must walk the path. A comprehensive approach which covers education, empowerment, value systems, lifestyle, and behavioral changes are required to make the UN Sustainable Development Goals a reality. With every individual action counts in making a global change, we not only make the difference, we are the difference. You and I are part of this journey, and we need to undertake this journey together. In this regard, I am happy to note that India and Sri Lanka are founding members of important initiatives such as International Solar Alliance, which focuses on renewables. India has also offered $100 million concessional financing for undertaking solar projects in Sri Lanka. India is currently engaged in over 25 purely grant projects in Sri Lanka, which are all people-oriented, making a real difference to the life of average Sri Lankan citizen. Be it the provision of livelihood support to 70,000 people of fishing and farming community in Hambantota, or the construction of the largest university auditorium in Ruhana, or setting up of an IT center in Jaffna, or the largest temperature-controlled warehouse in Dambula to minimize post-harvest losses, or rainwater harvesting units in the northern province. Our people-oriented projects stand as testimony to our commitment to walk with you in your development journey at a pace you are comfortable with. Both India and Sri Lanka have been jointly funding research programs in science and technology for close to a decade now. We are also partners in South Asia Satellite, launched 2 years ago, which has potential applications to further strengthen the socio-economic development and welfare needs of our countries through tele-education, telemedicine, disaster management, support, etc., etc. Sustainable development, my friends, for us is not a compulsion or an option, but our passion. I wish all the scholars the very best and fruitful deliberations ahead. I also want to add that there are several scholarships and training programs that are fully funded by Government of India, which are available to young scholars. You can contact our High Commission for details. I urge all of you to make use of these opportunities. As a wise man once said, true scholarship consists in knowing not what things exist, but what they mean. It is not memory, but judgment. May you all be wise judges. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that very thought-provoking speech, sir. Now, I would like to invite our Senior Research Fellow at the National Center for Advanced Studies in Humanities and Social Sciences, Professor Dilkushi Sena Ratna, to introduce our keynote speaker for this event, the United States Director at the American Institute for Sri Lankan Studies, Dr. John D. Rogers.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor and privilege to introduce the keynote speaker to the second International Symposium on Social Sciences and Humanities conducted by the NCAS. John is currently the United States Director of the American Institute for Sri Lankan Studies. He received his PhD from the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. He has taught at many universities. His past service includes membership of the South Asia Council of the Association for Asian Studies, membership of the Selection Committee of the International Dissertation Research Fellowship Program, and membership of the Executive Board of the Society for Advancing the History of South Asia. He has held research awards from the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Social Sciences Research Council, and the National Science Foundation. His publications include Crime, Justice, and Society in Colonial Sri Lanka, and numerous articles on the modern social and legal history of Sri Lanka. He is a historian. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. John D. Rogers.
It is a great honor to be invited to give the keynote address to this very distinguished gathering. I would like to thank the National Center for Advanced Studies in Humanities and Social Sciences, particularly Professor Dharmasiri and Professor Senaratne, for their invitation. When I first came to Sri Lanka in 1981 to do research at the National Archives, I could never imagine that I would have the opportunity to speak at such an occasion and to share a stage with such eminent figures. Before turning to my main subject, American research on Sri Lanka, I will speak briefly about the abstract question of how the humanities and social sciences might contribute to sustainable development, a concept that I am defining rather loosely as changes that lead to long-term improvements in the quality of life of the mass of citizens, including the poorer segments of society. Very broadly, I can see two main pathways that might lead from academic research to sustainable development. The first pathway is that the scholarship in question might produce knowledge that could be employed by citizens, NGOs, the private sector, or the state to improve social and economic conditions. This type of straightforward and practical contribution is more likely to take place in the social sciences than the humanities, as the social sciences are better positioned to uncover information of direct use to policymakers and others who seek positive change in areas such as gender relations, education, housing, disaster management, economic justice, social mobility, and the environment. While theories of sustainable development drawn from studies in other countries have many important lessons for Sri Lanka, policymakers and others seeking change also need studies carried out in Sri Lanka, which can take into account local conditions and assess the effectiveness of past and current development programs. Now, the second pathway from the social sciences and humanities to sustainable development is less obvious and thus harder to grasp. I believe that sustainable development requires more than facts and more than technocratic knowledge. It also requires human capital, which should be defined broadly to include not only tangible and intangible skills valuable in the labor market, but also skills and knowledge that enrich public culture. What constitutes sustainable development is never a given. Sustainable development is a value-laden concept that will vary from time to time and from country to country. Finding models that work in a particular place requires both high-level skills in reasoning and high-quality civil debate. Here, training and research in the humanities is just as essential as in the social science. Sustainable development, as opposed to older notions of economic development as measured only by gross national product, requires a civil society that values serious and informed analytical work in subjects such as art, music, literature, philosophy, religion, and history. Such a society can generate cultural, social, and political conditions where citizens and institutions can carry out reasoned and informed debate about the goals of sustainable development and the best ways to achieve them. Empirically based technocratic studies are also essential, but facts and practical knowledge alone do not produce sustainable development. It is, for instance, common everywhere in the world for a government department or think tank to commission social science research on how to tackle particular social problems. However, no matter how valuable the research findings, there is no guarantee that they will reach those who have the power to make use of them. Even if this does happen, it cannot be taken for granted that action will follow. Excellent and relevant studies often sit forgotten and unread on the shelf of a government office or university library. For research to be of use, it first needs to be disseminated, then discussed, analyzed, and then finally used as the basis for action. A nation with a public culture that values the humanities and social sciences for their own sake, and which values critical thinking, is likely to be a nation that is better positioned to use knowledge for the public good. Now, of course, this argument I'm making is not original, but in many parts of the world, including the United States, this point of view is under attack by those who wish to move resources away from the humanities and social sciences and towards science and business and other subjects deemed more relevant to the labor market. In such political climates, it's important that universities respond by insisting on high standards of teaching and research, because in the long run, maintaining quality is the only way to demonstrate the utility and relevance of the humanities and social science. The key to maintaining the viability of arts faculties in higher education is to focus on increasing quality, not quantity. I will now turn to the history of American scholarship on Sri Lanka. Before the Second World War, American interest in Asia was focused on China and Japan. But beginning in the late 1940s, the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union gradually led to increased American interest in many parts of Asia and Africa that had earlier attracted little attention. The United States was now a world power. Some of the larger American universities, acting on a feeling that the country required at least some level of expertise in the languages, cultures, and societies of previously neglected parts of the world, began to offer programs in what was called area studies, the interdisciplinary study of individual world regions. Sri Lanka was part of the newly conceived region of South Asia, but in American academia, South Asia stood mainly for the much larger nations of India and Pakistan. As a result, only a handful of individual American scholars carried out research in Sri Lanka in the 1950s and 1960s. However, a few Americans of this era made important contributions in and on Sri Lanka. An outstanding example is the sociologist Bryce Ryan, who was professor and chairman, Department of Sociology, University of Ceylon, from 1948 to 1952. The decision to hire him, made by Sir Ivor Jennings, Vice Chancellor of the university, marked the establishment of sociology as an academic discipline in Sri Lanka. Ryan made a significant impact during his 4 years at the university. He was known as an outstanding teacher, and on weekends he took undergraduates with him on trips to rural areas, where with the assistance of student translators he interviewed villagers about social conditions and gathered information that he used in his 1953 book, Caste in Modern Ceylon. According to Stanley Tembaya, an undergraduate at the time, he opened the eyes of students to the value of fieldwork as an intellectual pursuit. In the years following Ryan's departure, the quality of instruction in sociology at the University of Ceylon seems to have attained a very high level. After pursuing a doctorate at Cornell University, Tembaya returned to teach in the department, where his tenure overlapped with Gananatho Besekara, who also later achieved world renown. H.L. Senavaratna, another figure who was to build an international reputation, was also associated with the department around this time. All three of these individuals eventually ended up spending most of their careers in the United States, but they maintained their research interests in Sri Lanka, and through their publications gave prominence to Sri Lanka in world scholarship. Obesekera, as many of you know, returned to Sri Lanka after retiring from Princeton University and continues to contribute to scholarship, most recently with his 2017 book, The Doomed King, an account of the last king of Kandy. It's worth knowing that Obesekera, a giant in American anthropology who would have no problem publishing in the West, chose to publish this book only in Sri Lanka because he saw the volume as a contribution to Sri Lankan public culture. Another prominent American interested in Sri Lanka in the 1950s and 1960s was the political scientist Howard Riggins, who in his 1960 book, Ceylon, Dilemmas of a New Nation, documented the 1956 election and subsequent shifts in political culture. He then went on to have a distinguished career at Columbia University, where he specialized in the politics and international relations of South Asia. In 1977, he took a leave of absence from the university to take up the appointment of the United States ambassador to Sri Lanka, which enabled him to renew his ties with local scholars. While ambassador, he began a collaborative research project with the University of Peradeniya historian Kingsley de Silva, which led to a 2-volume political biography of J.R. Jayawardena. But scholars such as Ryan and Riggins, who made an impact not only through their publications, but also through years of engagement with lecturers and professors in Sri Lankan universities, were rare in the 50s and 60s. Most of the American academics who came to Sri Lanka in this era were funded through US government exchange programs, such as the Fulbright program. They would normally spend an academic year in the country, teaching and sometimes producing research, and sharing with Sri Lankan colleagues recent international developments in their discipline. But they did not usually maintain a long-term academic interest in Sri Lanka. This began to change at the end of the 1960s, in part because of the establishment of a Sinhala language program at Cornell University. Although there had been limited opportunities to study Tamil, it now became possible for postgraduate students and young faculty in the United States to prepare for research in Sri Lanka by studying Sinhala. The Cornell program, under the direction of the linguist James Gare, had its greatest impact through its intensive summer program and through the production of modern teaching materials for both colloquial and literary Sinhala. Gare himself first visited Sri Lanka in 1964 on a Fulbright fellowship and made numerous return trips, which enabled him to develop close relations with Sri Lankan colleagues. In the 1970s, he also studied Jaffna Tamil and Pali and contributed to the development of new textbooks for foreigners learning these languages. The respect in which he was held in Sri Lanka is demonstrated by the Doctor of Letters he received from the University of Kalenia in 1993 and by the 37 contributions to the felicitation volume published by Godege in 2008, which was presented to him on the occasion of his 80th birthday. Today, over 5 decades since Gare founded the Sinhala program, Cornell remains the only American university that teaches Sinhala, though there is now also a summer program at the University of Wisconsin. Now, over the course of the 1970s, enough Americans did research in Sri Lanka for the first time one can speak for a group of Sri Lankanists in the United States. However, this expansion of interest in Sri Lanka took on a rather peculiar form in that research and teaching on Sri Lanka was mostly limited to only 2 fields, Buddhist studies and cultural anthropology. The concentration in Buddhist studies was shaped by cultural changes in the United States brought on by the late 1960s student unrest, which included critiques of materialism and an increased interest in non-Western religions, especially Buddhism. Student demand ensured that universities could fill classes on Buddhism, so Americans who pursued doctorates in Buddhist studies had a good chance of attaining a permanent academic job. The reasons for the concentration in cultural anthropology are a bit more difficult to pin down. Of course, the origins of the discipline lay in the study of Asia, Africa, and the Pacific, those parts of the world that in the age of imperialism were often seen as the home of more exotic societies. Although anthropologists started studying Europe and North America as early as the 1950s, in the United States, the discipline was much more receptive than other social sciences to the notion that research on a small Asian nation might make a wider contribution to knowledge. It is no accident that Obesekera, Tembaya, and Seneviratne, all of who were at one time associated with the Department of Sociology at the University of Ceylon, ended up in anthropology departments in the United States. Sociology departments at this time were generally interested only in North America and Europe. In late 20th century America, scholars interested in Sri Lanka found anthropology a discipline that welcomed the study of what many saw as distant and obscure places. Now, in the last 2 decades of the 20th century, there was a modest expansion in the number of American faculty members interested in Sri Lanka, but this increase was mainly limited to the 2 disciplines with existing strength, Buddhist studies and cultural anthropology. There were some advantages to having interest concentrated in these 2 fields. It meant that research on Sri Lanka had a regular presence at 2 of the national annual disciplinary meetings, the American Anthropological Association and the American Academy of Religion. Intellectually, it meant that there were groups of scholars with enough common ground to engage each other in academic debates. It also meant there were American university departments in these disciplines interested in training postgraduate students with an interest in Sri Lanka, including students coming from Sri Lanka itself. If expertise had been spread evenly across disciplines, there would not have been the numbers to make an impact in any one area. On the other hand, this situation meant that in many important disciplines, the number of American scholars who were knowledgeable about Sri Lanka was very small. There were at most 1, 2, or occasionally 3 faculty members in fields such as environmental studies, economics, political science, geography, sociology, history, linguistics, literature, art history, and music. This led to American academia as a whole having a rather skewed view of Sri Lanka. For example, at one point there was a 35-year period when no American Department of History awarded a doctorate degree for a thesis on Sri Lanka. Over that same period, however, numerous doctorates on historical topics were awarded in departments of religious studies. This meant that while there was considerable expertise on the history of Buddhism, there was almost no expertise in political, economic, social, or legal history, and very little awareness of the rich body of scholarship produced by Sri Lankan historians. Such disparities served as obstacles to wide-ranging collaboration between Sri Lankan and American researchers and their institutions. While some Americans in Buddhist studies and anthropology developed long-standing relationships with particular Sri Lankan colleagues or with particular university departments, the large majority of Sri Lankan academic staff were in fields without American counterparts. There were several other obstacles to American-Sri Lankan collaboration in the late 20th century. One issue was language. When people like Ryan and Riggins came to Sri Lanka in the 1950s, the universities were very elitist, and all university staff members were fluent in English. But in the 1960s and 1970s, the teaching of English was given less priority in Sri Lanka. At the same time, the university expanded, with students and staff now coming from all social levels, including monolingual Tamil or Sinhala social backgrounds. Of course, a few Americans did develop fluency in Sinhala or Tamil and overcame this barrier, but in general, intellectual engagements between foreign and Sri Lankan scholars continued to take place in English. Sri Lankan lecturers who were less comfortable communicating in the English language did not benefit from links with American or other foreign students and scholars. I will now turn to the present In the 21st century, particularly over the last 10 years or so, there have been a number of developments that have improved the prospects of constructive collaboration in the social sciences and the humanities. On the American side, one change is in the social profile of postgraduate students and younger faculty. Many Americans with family origins in Sri Lanka are entering the field. Because they choose to study Sri Lanka in part to renew social and cultural ties with the island, they often give priority to establishing productive relations with Sri Lankan academic staff and to producing research that they hope will be relevant not only to international scholarship, but to Sri Lanka. Another positive development has been a more balanced disciplinary distribution of American academic work. Anthropology remains the strongest discipline, followed by Buddhist studies, but there is now more research being done in areas such as environmental studies, urban planning, political science, and literature. Some disciplines, such as art history, history, and sociology, remain relatively weak, but even these fields have more activity than in the past. Yet collaboration has also been made easier by the Sri Lankan educational system's increased emphasis on English. Many more Sri Lankan faculty are now comfortable communicating in English than was the case in the late 20th century. Finally, and importantly, recent developments in communications and information technology have greatly enhanced the prospects for long-term collaborations. When I'm in the United States, it is now just as easy for me to communicate with colleagues in Sri Lanka as it is to stay in touch with colleagues in other parts of America. Young people in particular, often heavy users of social media, can maintain ongoing ties in ways that were impossible back in the days when sending letters in the post was the only practical way to communicate. When a young Sri Lankan lecturer goes overseas to study for a postgraduate degree, he or she can remain connected with their home country. Similarly, when an American Fulbright scholar returns to the United States, it is now simple for him or her to keep in touch with colleagues here in Sri Lanka. While I'm optimistic about the prospects for mutually beneficial American-Sri Lankan collaboration, some obstacles remain. For instance, there is an imbalance of resources, with American universities having more funds and better facilities. Major American university libraries, for instance, have expensive online subscriptions to journals that Sri Lankan universities sometimes cannot afford. While Sri Lankans have the best access to materials published here, they often do not have access to books and other materials relevant to their disciplines. Of course, one of the benefits of transnational collaboration is that in some cases it can attenuate such disparities. Sri Lankans who study in the United States can temporarily take advantage of the resources at their host university. As more Americans and Sri Lankans build collaborative relationships, more Americans are sharing PDF files of articles obtained from their university libraries, while Sri Lankans can in return now share copies of material from Sri Lanka. There is also a recent global trend towards making research materials and publications available online on open access instead of through expensive subscriptions. One hopes that this trend will continue, as it is beneficial not only in countries like Sri Lanka, but researchers everywhere, including Americans at smaller institutions, which also cannot afford many of these subscriptions. So for American-Sri Lankan collaboration to succeed in ways that can enhance sustainable development, there also needs to be sincere engagement on the American side. I will give one example of a scenario where this engagement may be lacking. An American researcher with no previous experience in Sri Lanka may fly into the country, spend a short period in Colombo interviewing government officials or NGO staff about some issue of public policy, and then fly back to the United States, where he or she writes up an article that is published in a specialist journal, one that is not available in Sri Lanka. The author will often be ignorant of relevant research published by Sri Lankan scholars. Inherent in this approach is the assumption that the foreign researcher's interviews will give more insight into a problem than existing research by established local scholars, even when the foreigner knows little about the local, social, or political context. This sort of work may enhance the American researcher's career, but it's not likely to contribute to Sri Lanka scholarship, much less sustainable development. I'm not arguing that all Americans carrying out research on Sri Lanka need become specialists on the country. Outsiders who have relevant comparative or conceptual perspectives can sometimes throw new light on well-studied problems. But to produce useful knowledge, there needs to be more engagement with Sri Lanka than gathering data. Otherwise, the research becomes extractive. Sri Lanka is only a source of data that fuels the foreigner's career and will do nothing for sustainable development. I will conclude on a note of optimism about the prospects for productive American-Sri Lankan collaboration in the humanities and social sciences. Information technology now allows the construction of transnational academic networks in ways that were unimaginable by previous generations. When I began studying Sri Lankan history, we relied on letters to transmit information and ideas. Now there can be instantaneous back and forth. Of course, while technology can enable productive interaction, it cannot. That depends on both sides approaching the other with collegiality and respect, and for each side to listen to the other. I am hopeful that the younger generation of scholars today will take up these opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you for that very enlightening speech, sir. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, I would like to call upon the Director of the National Centre for Advanced Studies in Humanities and Social Sciences, Professor Lal Mervin Dharmasiri, to felicitate our dignitaries who have contributed immensely to the success of this symposium. The very first token of appreciation will be presented to our Chief Guest, High Commissioner of India to Sri Lanka, His Excellency Mr. Taranjit Singh Sandhu. Our guest of honor, Secretary to the Ministry of Higher Education, Technology and Innovations, Mr. Anuradha Dissanayake. Our keynote speaker for the event, the United States Director at the American Institute for Sri Lankan Studies, Dr. John D. Rogers. Our Senior Research Fellow at National Centre for Advanced Studies, Professor Dilkushi Senaratne. Now I would like to invite to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good morning to you all. It's my honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks on this memorable occasion on behalf of the National Centre for Advanced Studies in Humanities and Social Sciences. First and foremost, I thank our Chief Guest, His Excellency Mr. Taranjit Singh Sandhu, High Commissioner of India to Sri Lanka. Despite his busy schedule, has found time to grace this occasion. And also, I express my heartfelt thanks to our guest of honor, Mr. Anuradha Dissanayake, Secretary to the Ministry of Higher Education, Technology and Innovations, for his valuable contribution. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for the keynote speaker, Dr. John D. Rogers, and the plenary speakers for their valuable contributions. I thank the presenters and participants for their valuable contribution in this research symposium. I would like to express our sincere thanks to members of the Board of Management of the NCAS and the co-chairs of the research symposium for their valuable contributions and support. I thank all the invited distinguished guests present here accepting our invitation. Last but not least, I thank the organizing committee of the research symposium and the staff of the NCAS, the director, senior research fellow, senior assistant Bursa, network manager, and all our staff members and volunteers for their great contribution to making this event a success. Once again, I thank you all for your contribution and cooperations in making this event a resounding success. Thank you.
With this, we conclude the inauguration of the second International Symposium on Social Sciences and Humanities. I would like to invite all of you to join us for refreshments outside the ballroom, following which the very first plenary for the symposium would commence in this very hall at 11:45. Enjoy your tea.
Presently, he is working as a professor and head of the institute. Institute of Agricultural Science, SEG, University, Indore, India. He was the founder member for starting the course of BTech and MTech in biotechnology, and he has coordinated the BTech and MTech biotechnology for almost 10 years. He is the convener of different committees. He is a member of Academic Council, Board of Management, Board of Studies and Faculty of Science and Technology. He worked as an external examiner for various examinations. He has published more than 50 papers in his various journals of national and international repute. He has published 3 books. He has chaired the session, delivered keynotes, addresses, and invited lectures in almost 40 events. He has guided the students for research in the field of advanced science like as bioprocess engineering, nanobiotechnology, molecular biology, taxology, and horticulture, etc. So now I cordially invite Professor Kant Sharma to deliver his speech.
Good morning, Professor Lal, for giving a nice introduction about me. Thank you very much for that. I am very much thankful to Honorable Director, NCAS, Professor Lal Movind Dharmashri, Professor Roser, Professor De Silva, all learned persons, faculty members, students. Today I am going to discuss something which is related with the science and technology and how the science and technology involves in the development, especially sustainable development, which is very much essential. If we see the global agenda of the nations, it comprises the sustainability in the different forms. It comprises the sustainability in the form of the livelihood, which is directly related with the production of the different crops in different countries. So the sustainable development essentially means whatever we are using that should be judiciously used by the persons, those who are utilizing. At the same time, that should be left for the future generations in the judicious manner. How the sustainable development is essential, important. These are some points. To satisfy the basic human needs, yes, there are some needs which should be satisfied at the different levels, and the nature should provide that. If you are using the nature, if you are harnessing the different forms of the nature, yes, we can maintain the sustainability in that. Provide agricultural necessity. In the developing countries, most of the water, the potable water, is utilized for the production of the different crops. More specifically, the cultivated crops or the agricultural crops. So it is a great concern that how we can maintain the availability of the water, providing the food also. Accommodate development of cities. Development is necessary. Without development, we cannot sustain, and the development is going with a fast pace. In that case, we have to maintain the sustainability also. Control the climate change, a huge concern regarding the climate change. If we are deteriorating the climate or the environment on the cost of the development, that cannot be accepted. For acceptance of the development, it is necessary to maintain the sustainability, to maintain the form of the nature, whatever we are having. So, in the case of the sustainable development, that is important by maintaining the different things. To sustain the biodiversity, if we see, we measure the richness of any country by the biodiversity. The country is having high biodiversity, it gives a kind of impact that country is rich enough. In the case of the India, we are fortunate enough that we are having a high area and we are trying to maintain the biodiversity at a different level. No doubt we have formulated some governing bodies to maintain the biodiversity also. So for maintaining the biodiversity, again, the sustainability is essential. We are using so many technologies in the field of the agriculture sciences, and you will be surprised, we are using the drones, we are using the AI, artificial intelligence, to monitor the demand of the water by the plant through different kind of the signals, we can say that. It may be the images also. For that we use image processing technology as well as the GIS to project that. So in the case of agricultural technologies, improve productivity and soil and water conservation, which is very much essential to conserve the water as well as the soil, and maintain reasonable cost of food and fiber. We are totally dependent on the plants to have the food as well as to have the cloths. Improve the soil fertility. For producing the sufficient food with increasing population, we have to maintain the soil fertility. In the case of the technologies, as my lab is working, we are working with the nanobiotechnology where we form the nanoparticles. We form the nanoparticles by the different metals also, we form the nanoparticles by the different polymers. And recently we are going to develop nanofertilizers to maintain the fertility of the soil to give a better yield of the different crops. Improve the water availability and the efficiency of use. We have to use the water very judiciously. It is not available in ample amount. In some cases, like as in India, the Rajasthan state is having huge scarcity of the water, and we have to use that very judiciously. Reduce the food losses. Again, that is a huge concern. Enables farmers to modernize as this becomes feasible to them. In the modernization, we use the different kind of the technologies in the agricultural field, from sowing of the seed till the harvesting of the crops. There are different technologies which are available, and technology gives a better impact for the sustainability. In the case of the sustainable development, some other technologies also plays their important role, like as in the field of energy. It also impacts the sustainability, how we are producing the energy. We are producing energy from the nuclear fission or some other sources, so we have to ponder over on that. This picture shows the concern of the United Nations, and it is having 17 goals to transform our world in the case of the sustainable development. So these are the goals which are proposed by the United Nations. It starts with the no poverty. If we are saying, yes, we are depending on or we are believing on the sustainable development, still we are having the poverty. So this is not our goal. With a sustainable development, we should have no poverty or minimum poverty. Zero hunger. We have to have this motto with every country. There are so many countries who are having the people, those who are not having sufficient food for their sustenance, we can say that. Good health and well-being, yes, another important goal of this sustainable development. Quality education. Education is provided, but the quality education, where the student can feel self-sufficient. Student can feel confident. Student can develop him or herself to be an entrepreneur towards the sustainable development, we can say that. Gender equality, no biasness regarding the gender. Clean water and sanitation. Without that, we cannot imagine the sustainable development. Yes, there is an essential clean water and the sanitation. And in India, Honorable Prime Minister is taking the lead in the case of the sanitation. There is a movement which is called as Swachh Bharat. In Hindi, we call it Swachh Bharat. It's a clean India. So we can say that. Affordable and clean energy. Yes, very essential. How we are, as I have discussed, how we are producing the energy, whether we are disturbing our flora and fauna, that depend on the that further depend on the sustainability of the different aspect. Decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure. Whenever we think about the sustainable development, we always think about the infrastructure development or the skyscrapers or the jungles or the forest of the concrete which we are developing. Yes, on one way, it is the threat for the sustainable development. On another way, we cannot ignore it. So we have to cope up with such kind of the development at infrastructure level beside the other thing. Reduce inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production. So generally, if you see in so many countries, we waste too much in place of consumption. So we have to mitigate that. Climate action, that is, changing day by day. Life below the water, the aquatic bodies which are present in the ocean or in some other aquatic bodies. Life on the land or the terrestrial animals, terrestrial plants, peace, justice and strong institutions, partnership for the goals. So if we see, these are the 17 goals which are proposed by the United Nations towards the sustainable development. Yes, the last one, partnership for the goals, I think that is very much important. We have different countries who are developed enough, who are having good technologies to do the things in better way. I think Professor Roser will be agree with that. So I think we should collaborate, we should share the technologies which we are developing for the humankind, for the sustainable development at the point of view of science and technology. Environmental technologies for many developing countries, provisions of basic water, seawater and refuse diffusal services are major environmental priorities. So now these are gaining some importance to dispose properly. There are some kind of the projects which can be started at the community level to have the idea about the residential architecture, solar greenhouses. Solar energy is playing the pivotal role in the case of sustainable development without disturbing the nature. Small farm systems, farmers and farmer markets. In India, we emphasize to develop some kitchen gardens to get good foods and to get clean or healthy food. Communication technologies, yes, these are playing the important role in the case of the communication in nowadays to develop the business, to develop the trade, and to health and education, through which we can spread or increase the awareness about the sustainable development. If we think about the science, if we think about the technology, some of these words come into the mind. Since I have quoted, my lab is working on the formation of the different nanoparticles for the different uses. We use the nanoparticles for the drug delivery also. We use the nanoparticles to enrich the fertility of the soil. So I'm going to give a kind of glimpse about my lab, which we are working. So the technological innovations in the different fields of modern science, especially agricultural, biotechnology, by the involvement of bio and nanochemistry at various levels. Whenever we come back from chemical to bio, that mimic our nature. And whenever we are mimicking our nature, we are close towards the sustainable development. I think all of you are aware about the plastic or the polythene, which is very much harmful, but whenever we say polyhydroxybutyrate, which is the derivative of polyhydroxyalkanoate or the bioplastic, it is environment friendly, and that gives a kind of boost to the development of any nation. So whenever we are thinking about the bio, we are close enough towards the sustainable development. Whenever we say the bio nanotechnology, it is the amalgamation of biotechnology with the nanotechnology. In the case of the biotechnology, we use microbes, we use plants, we use DNA, we use enzymes. So the origin is biological, and that involves the technology where we form the small particles which are in the range of nanometer, or in the case of the quantum, that is in the range of femto. So nanobiotechnology takes most of its fundamentals from nanotechnology. Most of the devices designed for nanobiotechnology uses are directly based on other existing nanotechnologies. Now we can measure the level of the glucose inside the blood. It is basically, it's a biosensor, which is the amalgamation of the medical field, or we can say the field which is involving directly with the life and the electronics, through which we sense what is the percentage of the glucose is present into the blood. So such kind of the devices we are developing nowadays for the development of the nation, of any country. So there are some kind of the direct applications of the nanotechnology in the field of agriculture field, includes agrochemicals, delivery and nutrition, nanoscale carriers, smart packaging materials, pesticides, and nanosensors. Nowadays, we can see some kind of a nanosensors which can sense a small amount of any noxious gas. The size and the shape of the nanoparticles will be different through which way we are synthesizing. That depends. What material we are utilizing, that depends on that. There are some metals we have utilized for the synthesis of the nanoparticles, like as gold, silver, platinum, zinc, copper. And there are some kind of the polymeric materials also. So if you see, these are the current applications of nanobiotechnology in the different fields, in the field of microbial biotechnology, agricultural technology, animal sciences, environment field, and the medical sciences. Some of you, those who are having the background of the science and technology, they may be aware about these pictures which are showing, these are the carbon nanotubes, single-walled nanotubes, double-walled nanotubes, and the multiple-walled nanotubes. And if we classify the material, these are the levels of the materials at the different level. We can say macro, micro, and nano. And how we are developing in this space. Initially, we had the steam engines, and now we are very much minute enough towards the nanotechnology. So that is a kind of technological advancement which is having a different kind of impacts on the society. Nanotechnology or the synthesis of nanoparticle is not new. Earlier in the Rome, they use it to paint different sculptures to give a different kind of colors. So that happens in that. And this is the evolution of the nanomaterials that was started earlier in the 1857, and still this is going on. How it happens? It happens with the synthesis of functional material. Why the functional material is essential? It is essential to give a kind of uses. Otherwise, no one will use these materials. Devices and systems through the control of nanoscale materials, which ranges from 1 to 100 nanometers. And after synthesis of these materials, the material may have the noble properties as per their size. There are some kind of the special things which are associated with the nanoscale. Bulk material have the constant properties regardless of size, but the nanomaterials are having different properties as per the size. Nanomaterials can be used to cover high surface area. So whenever we are using nanoparticles to cover up a scar or wound, in the case of the gel which is having some kind of nanoparticles, it can spread over a large area. So in that case, if we are using in the field of medical science, the small quantity of medicine can be applied to treat the different diseases. And if someone is swallowing in the form of tablet or capsule, again the quantity can be mitigated. Nanomaterials is bridge between the atomic or the molecular structure. Suspension of nanoparticles are possible, and if you will be surprised, nowadays the research in the case of mechanical engineering is on ferrofluids or the fluids which are having some magnetic properties, and they are using for some kind of the lubrication. In the case of rheological properties, there we use in that. This is a kind of difference if we want to compare about the material at the normal scale and the nano scale. There are some kind of the differences at their appearance or in the form of different conductance or as per the uses also. CNT and the titanium oxide, these are the two materials which are highly usable in the case of nanomaterials. You will be glad to know one of the famous institutions in India, you may be aware about the IIT Kanpur, Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur in UP, Uttar Pradesh. They are using the cow urine to develop some kind of the nanomaterials. And they are using these nanomaterials for the different uses. If you see the color of nanomaterials, that also varies at the different level, at the different size. Here is one example. We can see that in the case of the gold, shows the deep red to black in the solution in the case of the different sizes. In the case of the silver, as the nanoparticle, if the size is more than 50 nanometer, it appears as white. And in the case of 20 to 40 nanometer size of the nanoparticles, it appears as brown. And less than 50 nanometer, it appears as black. So as per the uses, as per the necessity, we synthesize the nanoparticles at the different sizes. And again, as I have quoted, sometimes it depends on the method of the synthesis, by which method we are synthesizing the nanomaterials. There are different methods through which we synthesize the nanomaterials, through the sonication, through the at the room temperature. These are some famous names in the case of the carbon nanotubes. Sumio Izima in 1991 discovered the monowall CNTs and predicted amazing electronic and physical properties. So this is not limited with the nanotubes. Now the nanotechnology or the nanobiotechnology reached till the level of the medical science. And in India, there is a body has been formulated to see the impact of nanomaterials on human being. So this kind of the importance we can imagine about the nanotechnology, especially about the nanoparticles. These are some images you can see about the single walled CNT, multi-walled and double walled CNTs. If we come to the material synthesis, there are some kind of the classification which have been made on the basis of the nature, whether that is synthetic or natural, whether by nature it is inorganic or organic, whether it is bulk, microscale or nanoscale. So this is the classification about the types of materials. And when we comes about the synthesis of materials, broadly it is classified as 4 parts: physical, chemical, biological, and hybrid. We work on the biological synthesis because we want to develop some material which mimics the biological properties or which will not harm the material, the nature, we can say that. And there are 2 approaches which are famous in the case of nanoparticle synthesis. One is top-down approach, another is bottom-up approach. In the case of top-down approach, we formulate the nanoparticles by crushing the bulk material into the fine one in the form of the nanoparticles. In the case of bottom-up, we aggregate atoms or molecules in the form of nuclei and further these aggregate to form the nanoparticles. So bio-nanotechnology is the new term. As I have quoted, it is an amalgamation of the biotechnology and the nanotechnology. And we use the microorganisms like as fungi, yeast, bacteria, plant extracts or enzymes. Sometimes we use DNA, cell membrane, viruses to synthesize the nanoparticles. This is the flow chart or the steps involved in the green synthesis of silver nanoparticles. First of all, we have to select which medium will be suitable, especially the solvent, whether the organic solvent or the inorganic solvent will be suitable. Then the environmentally benign reducing agent selection. The reducing agent should be non-reactive, which will not harm the environment. And the non-toxic substances, for example here we have considered the silver nanoparticles, so that can also be synthesized. Silver nanoparticles and how these synthesized nanoparticles can be stabilized. There is an issue regarding the synthesis of the nanoparticles, that is stability. There is a property of the nanoparticles, they tend towards the aggregation, and if we are not able to maintain the segregation of these nanoparticles aggregate. For that we use stability agents. So in the case of metals, we use the sulfates, nitrates and oxides which possess high reduction potential to reduce and have the tendency of electron donation, and therefore they increase density of electrons on their conjugative salts. Thus metals in their ionic form rapidly get detached from their anionic parts and undergo further reduction. So reduction is very much essential in the case of synthesis of nanoparticles. Since we are using the biological path, so we use the plant extract. Plants are having very good potential to reduce that. Plant extract rich in diverse biochemical reducing agents such as alkaloids. In India, there is a medical system which is known as Ayurveda. And in Ayurveda, we use different bhasma. The bhasma is basically the concoction, we can say, in the form of dry. Otherwise, we can say the concoction which is in the form of syrup also. And they use the nanoparticles, we can say that, the form of nanoparticles of these plants which are rich in the alkaloids, saponins, or other medical substances which may be present. So the plants are having alkaloids, polyphenols, terpenoids, and flavonoids, which as chelators, they bind with the free metals, rapidly absorb electrons from cationic metal species and reduce them further to zero valent state for the synthesis of nanoparticles. After that, the formation takes place and the growth of nanoparticle takes place. Further, we bother about the stabilization of these metal nanoparticles. Nowadays we cannot ignore these nanoparticles in different forms. In the different medicines, we use such nanoparticles, and the nano devices. For the imaging purposes, we are using the nano devices. So nano is now the indispensable part of our life. After the fabrication of silver nanoparticles, it is essential to characterize. Whatever we have done, whatever we have synthesized, these should be characterized for the confirmation. Whatever we have formulated as per the need, they are formulated or not. So for the characterization purpose, we use some methods. It may be the change in color, it may be the UV visible spectroscopy. Further, we analyze the nanoparticles by the zeta sizer and zeta potential. Through the zeta sizer, we analyze about the size, and through the zeta potential, we analyze the potential of these nanoparticles which we have formulated. For the characterization, further we move towards the FTIR, Fourier infrared spectroscopy. Again, there we can identify which kind of the functional groups are present. After doing that, we can take the images from the scaling electron microscopy to see whether the nanoparticles are formulated, the shape of the nanoparticles we can see. And after that, we can use the these nanoparticles can be used for the different purposes. Here we have utilized to see antimicrobial activity. So if the nanoparticles are having some kind of the antimicrobial activity, this can be utilized as the medicine to kill some kind of the microbes. This is one example. Here we have taken to synthesize the nanoparticles, that is the Piper beetle. In India, it is consumed after having a heavy meal to chew it with the different spices, we can say. So betel leaf contains phenols, alkaloids, carbohydrates, amino acids, tannins, and steroid compounds. It is having very good potential to be used as antimicrobial and against the ringworm. It is also having the property of antifungal and anti-helminthic properties. Whenever some kind of the worms which are present into the stomach of any infant, generally in India, they give it to kill the worms in a specific quantity. So this is the experimental design. You can see here. So preparation of the plant extract, then a fabrication of 7 nanoparticles using the different plant extracts, characterization and by the different methods, and finally to evaluate antimicrobial properties. Here you can see from the right of mine, you can see the color which is changing from the 0 hour to the 24 hours. Earlier it was almost pale, and then you can see the dark color of the silver nanoparticles which are formulated at the different time intervals. Through the UV visible spectroscopy, it has been characterized that the characteristic peak comes at almost 400 nanometers or 410 nanometers. So it was further confirmed by the UV visible spectroscopy. Then the zeta sizer and zeta potential was done to see whether the size is appropriate or not. So this is showing almost 59 nanometer in the case of diameter of nanometer, in the case of nanoparticles. And since it is showing almost minus 22.9 millivolt in the case of the potential, which are good enough to be considered as a nanoparticles further. So this is the FTIR spectra of these nanoparticles which was synthesized. And through this spectra, we can see the different functional groups are present at different levels with the centimeter inverse. This is the image of the SEM, which is showing the size. Basically, the size has been, I think that is not appearing. So the size is almost 60 nanometer of the particles basically. After doing this, we have utilized some microbial cultures, and these microbial cultures were cultured in the petri plates, and then we have applied the plant extract. Beside that, the nanoparticles which were formulated into the laboratory, and then it has been observed that the zone of inhibition, which is the indication of the property that that is showing some kind of the antimicrobial property with two of the microbes in the case of silver nitrate, silver nanoparticles, and two have not shown any kind of zone of inhibition. So if you see in the case of the nanoparticles, here I want to summarize that it is having huge potential. Just we have to utilize in a direction where we can harness the good qualities of nanoparticles. In this case, we have utilized for antimicrobial purposes basically. These are some publications which we have made in our laboratory. Recently we have published a complete issue from the Bentham on the biomarker. I was a guest editor of that. These are the research scholars in my laboratory. These are the colleagues. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.
First of all, thank you very much for Professor Chandrakant Sharma, and he is a professor of and as well as the head Institute of Agriculture Sciences, Sage University, Indo, Madhya Pradesh, India. And in fact, he has made an excellent presentation about the he has made a presentation on number of areas. The first part was that what you call the sustainable developments, and he tried to show that sustainable development goals are extremely important for development is concerned, and it's a global agenda for sustainable development. And going through all the 11 sustainable development goals, 17 sustainable development goals, he has clearly mentioned that science particularly important for social well-being, and also how the science applications, innovations can be used for development purpose and the human well-being. In that agenda, he has strongly mentioned that in order to satisfy basic human needs, I don't think I should explain, he has already explained about the basic human needs, how the basic human needs can be very much important under the sustainable development goals, and also how the science and technology particularly can be used for this particular purpose. And he has taken number of examples from the various disciplines, and for example now he has taken the agricultural technology, and he has very clearly mentioned that number of states in the India, even Uttar Pradesh and Rajasthan, there is a water shortage. In that scenario, what type of seeds will be most useful for in order to have a high yield. And also particularly he has mentioned about the India, as well as I think it is applicable to Sri Lanka also. Technology usage is very much required for the reduction of food losses. Even in Sri Lanka also it is very true. Most of the scientists tend to say that nearly 1/3 of the produced food by the farmers are going to be lost because of the poor storage facilities, and because of the lot of insects and other rats and other they tend to eat. And the other part then he has discussed about the energy technology, and particularly he has discussed about the local development, housing, the solar power, and also all kind of requirement for the local development is concerned. And I think Sri Lanka, India, all are considering about the solar power energy. And also then he has mentioned about the communication technologies, how this nanotechnology and technological advancement can be used for communication technologies also. And also he has mentioned in one of his slides very clearly, use of fertilizer, nano fertilizer. In Sri Lanka also we have a serious concern about the farmers tend to use, I think it is the same in India also, the farmers tend to use overdose of fertilizer for agricultural production. Therefore we also observed they are very much vulnerable for various kind of diseases, chronic kidney disease and so many other skin diseases they already experience. I think probably in South Asia it's a very common, but I think along with the what we call this nano fertilizer, because I am a person coming from the demography. Fertility is a more common word. Fertilizer is, nano fertilizer is very much required for better production as well as the safety is concerned, I believe. And also particularly like a country like India, where the more than 1,300 million people require the food, and naturally Indian population is increasing very rapidly. By another 30-40 years time, Indian population may, of course we have to mention that Indian population is going to bypass Chinese population by another 20 years time. Therefore Indian population is required very much of the basic needs. The food is very much one of that. Therefore, nano fertilizer is very much required for the sustainable development, and also providing sufficient amount of food for the people, and also to maintain their nutrition. And then in fact he has mentioned about the nanotechnology, macro levels, micro and nano level, all those things. And he has discussed about the nanoscales very much. And also then he has mentioned about the particular experiment he has conducted in his laboratories, the piper beetle, and the value of piper beetle for treatment for various health problems. And also finally what I want to mention is that nanotechnology, of course in Sri Lanka also various universities are doing some work on nanotechnology and nanoparticles. But in the same time probably you have not touched upon that particular area. The nanotechnology in the same time has been used for, there is a potential for warfares. Biological weapons can be very much developed through the nanotechnology, which can be very harmful for...
That is not for sustainable development, so I have not done that.
Yes. Therefore, throughout the world, we are observing that many countries, of course, there is a threat that nanotechnology particles and nanotechnology research has been used for destruction of the human being. But of course, he has mentioned about the development of the human beings and well-being of the human beings. But in the same time, we should not forget about, even in Sri Lanka, sometime we had that kind of threat. And many parts in the South Asia, even the emerging, particular groups may be trying to absorb that kind of technology. Therefore, nanotechnology is probably going to replace the atomic energy and so on to some extent. To some extent, not heavily, yes. Therefore, and the top of all those things, I think there is another area probably which may be nanotechnology may be very useful. Like even I know that the airplanes are concerned that very light airplanes can be developed with the nanotechnology, and even day-to-day household material can be very much developed from the nanotechnology. And in fact, again, on behalf of the National Center for Advanced Studies, Ministry of Higher Education, Sri Lanka, we should really thank Professor Chandrakant Sharma coming from India and making excellent presentation about somewhat science discipline, but its application on human beings, the well-being part of the humans. Therefore, thank you very much for your excellent presentation.
Thank you very much, sir. I am very much thankful to the NCS and Ministry of Higher Education Sri Lanka for inviting me to discuss my thoughts in front of you. Thank you very much, sir.
Now I would like to invite Professor Indrelal De Silva to present a token of appreciation to the plenary speaker. Thank you, sir. Now I would like to invite Professor Dilkushe Senaratne, Senior Research Fellow, National Center for Advanced Studies in Humanities and Social Sciences, to present the tokens of appreciation to the chairpersons.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I would like to announce that the lunch is served outside the main hall. You all are invited to join the technical sessions, which will start after lunch. And also this announcement is for the presenters. The presenters should be present at your respective room at 12:45, and make sure that your presentations are saved into the particular computer which is in that respective room. Enjoy your lunch.
Malhotra is available here for today? Don't know whether she's. Yeah. I will proceed with the second presenter. There are two presenters, D. Ghosh and C. Roy. The title of the presentation is Emotion and Creativity, a case study with specific art form, within brackets recitation using time dilatation.
Good afternoon, Sri Lanka. Good afternoon, Colombo. Good afternoon, everybody. Here I am presenting the topic of my presentation, Emotion and Creativity, a case study with specific art form using time dilation. Since when I intend to identify the research area post my post-graduation in the hardcore engineering form control systems, it was always a curiosity that stirred my mind that how technology can actually impart a value-added system to the sustainable development of humankind in terms of emotion analytics. And then I came across the wonderful statement by none other than Albert Einstein that curiosity has its own reason for existing. Yes, they did. And this is the curiosity that led me to identify that yes, there is a huge relevance between emotion and creativity, and how this emotion can be technically analyzed, implemented, identified for the better understanding of creativity enhancement as an evoked potential of collective understanding. What is the current situation of the world now? Let's take a very close view. The world is nowadays expressed to be VUCA, V-U-C-A, where V stands for volatility, U stands for uncertainty, C stands for complexity, and A stands for ambiguity. This is an extremely vulnerable situation. We all are exposed to all sort of uncertainties, unpredictabilities, and complexities, where we all are so much ambiguous about probability between half and half, whether to do or whether to do not, what to happen and what not. And perhaps that is because one of the very primitive and primary reasons the entire change set of profession is going to embark a huge change pattern in terms of employability, education, and quality of life that the next generation is going to encompass with. And there comes the implication of creativity and emotion. Recent studies are showing that the huge gap between the delivery need and the deliverables can be met up by designing a platform using creativity and emotion. If you can design thinking, if you can implement artificial intelligence, if you can indeed implement machine learning into the creative evoked potential, that indeed is going to betterment the sustainable development for mankind, even in technological perspectives, to a great extent. So what do we intend to do? We have seen that the color and music are the two stimuli which has got a huge impact in human brain and mind. They do evoke emotional exercises, and the kind of emotions that we all perceive in our mind can be technologically identified. The complexities that we come across in our mind, that is in brain, that can be clinically identified. And this study is something which we present here with a neurocognitive approach in reference to different color and audio stimuli. So now what's the correlation between music and visuals? The correlation is very simple because they are the potentials which cause emotion to happen. Those are the potentials which are processed in the same part of the body, which is brain. Here I'll try to emphasize on a very specific word which says synesthesia. So now what is this? It's a kind of a quality present in many a mankind who can visualize a situation where they hear to certain audio stimuli. So few of us, we are synesthetic people, and the rest of us, we are not. But even if we are non-synesthetic, we can actually intend to have an visual impact if we listen to something very carefully. This is a wonderful mechanism of brain which can indeed help you to visualize a situation when you listen to something. Perhaps that's because of one reason when you listen to a childhood lullaby, which you used to listen in your early days when by your grandma or your mother, you intend to visualize automatically your childhood memories. So this potential of synesthesia can actually be implemented in terms of studying this potential analysis. So now there comes the question that color and music has similar emotional qualities that inspire arousal in similar manner. Why so? There is something called mood inducer, something that induces a mood. It can be an audio, it can be a video. If we try to introspect from that perspective, that whatever we see around, it is basically a combination between audio and visual signals. Basically, it's all about combination of acoustics and R, G, and B. So now, if we can establish an experimental setup using which we can actually identify that a large set of data, when they are exposed to this kind of stimuli, how they are reacting towards it, the technical analogy of emotional evoke potential can be identified. Coming to the base part of the research orientation, time dilation. We all know that our generation suffers from patience. Why? Because we don't have time. There's a very, very popular meme in social media nowadays. A girl is praying to Almighty, Lord, please give me some patience, but make sure do it fast. Yes, we don't have time with ourselves, and it is time that decides that how much lengthy or how fast any appearance, any visual, any audio stimuli is going to appear to your mind and memory. And using this property, we are trying to identify that when a delivery of performance is being classified with respect to different stimuli, how time dilation can help the non-performers to identify the relevance with respect to time. Emotion can contribute to creativity in several ways. As you all know that lot of exercises, lot of research works has already been there in the field of emotion and creativity, and positive and negative emotions, they indeed can implement a human mind to react to time dilation studies. In Mexico, so emotions are like that. You do not know, a smiler, a very minor form of an excitement, a very minute form of a visual and audio stimuli can cause an exuberant luxury of emotional evoke in your mind. And that is the principle with which chaos theory started. In order to study the emotional signals of our brain, we need to approach a technical analogy which will help us to identify the chaos, the emotional signals to be identified, analyzed, processed, and discussed. And that technique is nothing but fractal. So now what is fractal? Fractal is a kind of an approach which can be iterated over a longer period of time to approach the totality of an approximation you are intending to identify. If it can be done over one single prospect, it is monofractal. If it is not, it is multifractal. Like a broccoli is a monofractal, and the emotional signals that you are talking about, they are multifractal. These are the different methodologies using which the fractals can be tested. And here we come to the experimental setup. Happy and sad stimuli exposed to a person, he performs a form of rendition. A set of audience hears to the two different kind of rendition, and they identify two stuffs. One is color and the other one is time. And in most of the cases, the experiment was performed where the audience was indifferent to the visual interferences of the stimuli. They did not know that what kind of a stimuli is being evoked to the performer. The performer has chosen 3 pieces, and each of them was performed one after other, one being exposed to the happy stimuli, next being exposed to the sad stimuli, of course with a sizable gap, and all 3 items were of comparable length. I already mentioned about the experimental protocol. This is the Munsell color wheel from where each of the audience has picked up a color, and from there we could identify the RGB values. As you can see that from the hex code, the RGB values for each of the color depiction, that could be identified. As I mentioned about the 3 clips, here it is clip number 1. For the happy and sad stimuli, the corresponding average RGB values are there. And here goes the bar graph for clip number 1. So for clip number 2, and say for this is clip number 3. The time dilation study is very interesting. We collected almost 184 number of specimen data, which is, as for human response data, it's not a very small set of data set. And 12% of the people have said almost on an average that the happy segment is longer, but in most of the majority cases you could see that people are saying that when the performer is exposed to sad stimuli, the performance is supposed to be a longer one. Yes, future scope of enhancement is always there, and these are the references that we studied. Thank you for the patient listening, and I'd love to answer to queries if any. Thank you.
Reverend, respected chairpersons, ladies and gentlemen. In a language without metaphor, Godfrey Gunathilaka expresses concern about the lack of an indigenous sensibility among Sri Lankan writers in English. My objective is to try to see whether there has been significant progress in the expression of indigenous sensibility in the Sri Lankan women's novel in English during the past quarter century. For this, I took the last 2 novels that written by women that was given the Gratian Prize in the first 25 years of its history. Now, from 1993 to 2018, there have been 32 winning entries, 11 of which were given to novels. Of those 11, 7 were by male writers and 4 by female writers. In my study, I took the first and the last, namely Punyakanti Vijayanayaka's Amulet. I come to my main conclusion by way of 2 research queries. See, the writer who uses better standard English, who also has a better grasp of standard English and Sri Lankan usage in these 2 novels. This is the summarization. Amulet shows a total of 549 language errors to 100. There is a total of 104 writer who uses a better standard English, who also has a better grasp in the use of Sri Lankan English in our Sri Lankan women writers. Misspelling of an indigenous term in Amulet. Inappropriate choice of an indigenous or an English